Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, June 25th, 2026. The Supreme Court rules that the Trump administration can move forward and end temporary protected status TPS for Haitian and Syrian nationals living in the U.S. and does not have to offer immigrants turned away at the border the chance to apply for asylum, saying that the immigrants never arrived in the U.S. because they did not physically set foot in the country. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announces that the federal immigration detention center in the Everglades, known as Alligator Alcatraz, is closing. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin gets into heated exchanges over immigration policy with Democratic House members at an Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. House conservatives shut down House floor legislative business for a second day in a row over their demands that the Senate pass the bill called the Save America Act that would require proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote. Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaks about U.S. aid to Venezuela after the devastating earthquakes hit that country. Senate reverses itself on the Iran war in a late-night vote, now blocking a War Powers Act resolution that would have required the president to withdraw forces if he didn't get congressional authorization. The nominee for the chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, Stephen Phelan, testifies before the Senate Banking Committee as a new inflation report shows prices rose at the highest level since 2023. And Vice President J.D. Vance talks about his new book, Communion: Finding My Way Back to Faith, at the Nixon Library in California. Fox News writing the Supreme Court handed President Donald Trump two major immigration victories on Thursday morning, both having to do with his administration's efforts to reduce asylum claims. In the first case, Mullin v. El Otro Lado, the court held that migrants who are turned away at the border before entering the United States are not entitled to apply for asylum. In the second case, Mullin v. Doe, the court ruled that Haitian and Syrian nationals in the U.S. with temporary protected status could not receive judicial relief, postponing the revocation of their status while they challenged Trump administration's efforts to revoke it in court. That was from Fox News. Both of these decisions were 6-3 votes. There are about 350,000 Haitians and about 6,000 Syrians living in the U.S. under TPS protection. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Democrat from Massachusetts, co-chair of the House Haiti Caucus, responded to the decision in a news conference on the steps of the Supreme Court.
Today's Supreme Court ruling is a rubber stamp for a cruel and callous administration that seeks to separate families, traumatize children, profit off their pain, and deport them even though they did nothing wrong and committed no crime. Ending TPS for Haitians, ending TPS for Syrians in this ruling endangers all TPS holders: Venezuelans, Hondurans, Ukrainians, and others. The implications of this ruling are nothing short of catastrophic. Business owners will lose their staff and employees because they will no longer have work permits. They'll be forced to close, which will hurt local economies in urban, suburban, and rural communities. Seniors will lose their caregivers when we already have a caregiving crisis, and seniors will lose their ability to age in community with much needed assistance. And the children will lose their classmates who will be forced to leave this country. And America will lose out on the talent, skills, and culture that immigrants contribute every single day. Whether we are discussing the earthquakes in Venezuela that happened yesterday, or the earthquake that destabilized Haiti more than a decade ago, temporary protected status is a lifeline. It has a purpose that helps our economy and bolsters our national security. Today's ruling is lawless, unjust, should not stand. This fight is not over, and the Senate should take this bill up. Our discharge petition that passed the House on April 16th should take this up immediately and save lives.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Democrat from Massachusetts, at a news conference today outside the Supreme Court. On April 16th, the House passed a bill to extend temporary protected status, TPS, for Haitian immigrants for 3 years. By a vote of 224 to 204, the bill came to the floor by discharge petition over the objections of the House Republican leadership. The White House border czar Tom Homeland was asked about today's Supreme Court decision on TPS for Haitians and Syrians. He was at a news conference in Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis. You'll hear the governor first repeat the question from the reporter.
The TPS decision that the U.S. Supreme Court just 6-3 about they can allow, so the president has the constitutional authority to make it temporary and not permanent.
It's the right call. You know, I've been doing this since 1984. TPS has never been temporary. That's why the whole statute exists. Temporarily give people protection while the country's in turmoil or after they suffer a hurricane. But the problem is no administration have had the guts to actually follow that statute. President Trump has the guts to follow the law. So temporary means temporary. When the condition of that country gets better, they need to go home. There are millions of people standing in line want to be part of the greatest nation on earth. And that goes back to my early point. People say, why you arrest them if they're not criminals under 10 years? Because they cheated the system. They may have been here 10 years, so let's remember, when you enter the country illegally, it's a crime, and they're doing that, putting themselves in front of the line while millions of people are taking their tests, doing their background investigation, paying their fees to be part of the greatest nation on earth. So temporary means temporary, and I'm grateful for that decision. That's going to be a question for ICE. I mean, this just happened, so I'm sure they're developing plans along with Secretary Mullin how to implement that. But again, a great decision. Temporary should mean temporary. That's the way the law is written. I'm glad that the Supreme Court recognized that.
The White House border czar Tom Homeland, along with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, at a news conference today in Ochapee, Florida. NPR writes that Congress enacted the TPS law in 1990 to allow fully vetted and eligible migrants to live and work legally in the U.S. if they cannot return safely to their home countries because of natural disasters, armed conflicts, and other extraordinary conditions. The Department of Homeland Security designates which foreign countries qualify for TPS. The Trump administration had attempted to strip TPS from 13 of the 17 countries that had it before the second term began. As for the remaining 4 countries that still have TPS, El Salvador, Lebanon, Sudan, and Ukraine, they may well lose their TPS when they come up for renewal this fall. That was from National Public Radio. The news conference in Florida was called to announce that the immigration detention facility at the Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport in Florida Everglades, named Alligator Alcatraz, is shutting down, and all the detainees have been relocated. It was opened in July 2025 to serve as a staging ground for undocumented immigrants facing deportation. Here again is Governor DeSantis.
Alligator Alcatraz fulfilled the role that it was designed to serve. Today it now has 0 detainees. It has helped remove many dangerous people from the street and get them out of not only the state of Florida, but the United States of America. The detainees that were here are still in federal custody. The demobilization efforts here at this facility are underway. We stood this up. We surged critical resources. We built critical infrastructure. We were able to manage very complex operations, and we were able to efficiently execute the mission when called upon. There's no question that this mission has made the state of Florida safer. There's no question that releasing some of these folks would have represented a clear and present danger to the well-being of Floridians up and down the Florida Peninsula. Our efforts to support this important mission of immigration enforcement continues. Our 287G agreements are still in effect. Our Baker County facility is still in operation, and the mission continues. But DHS is in a better footing. DHS has more capacity to be able to handle these folks. And I always said, we're only doing this because it's necessary. The minute that they have the capacity to handle these folks and not release them on the street, we're going to be supporting those efforts. And so we've arrived at that point, and I'm proud of everybody who worked very hard to help keep the state of Florida safe, to stand up for the rule of law and American sovereignty, and ultimately this saved lives. I have no doubt that this saved lives.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, at a news conference in Florida with the White House border czar Tom Homan. Congressman Maxwell Frost, Democrat of Florida, posted a video Wednesday about the closing of Alligator Alcatraz.
Alligator Alcatraz has cost Florida taxpayers $1.2 billion and counting. This horrible experiment in human suffering, destroying our environment, and using our taxpayer dollars to enrich vendors and corporations is coming to an end. However, what we all have to understand is that it's still going on. And this is what I mean by that. Even though new reporting shows that they've officially been told to tear everything down, every vendor at Alligator Alcatraz has a contract with the state. And in that contract, they have a clause that's called the demobilization clause. This clause states that when the state tells them to tear everything down, they get to charge us taxpayers a demobilization fee, a fee to take everything down that they put up. We anticipate that these fees will total up to tens of millions of dollars in additional money that we get to pay out to the vendors and corporations that did the internment camp in the Everglades. And this is just another example of how politicians are using ICE and mass deportation as a vehicle to move more public dollars to corporations and to donors.
Congressman Maxwell Frost, Democrat from Florida, posting that video. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida said that in the year of operation of Alligator Alcatraz, 21,000 detainees passed through and were deported. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention centers and the treatment of detainees also came up today in Washington as Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin testified before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security. Associated Press writes that earlier this month, Immigration and Customs Enforcement said they would no longer report deaths of detainees who have recently been released from its custody in a change that could obscure the full human cost of the Trump administration's mass detention policies. The move rescinds a 2021 policy implemented by the Biden administration that required ICE to report to Congress and investigate deaths of detainees that occur within 30 days of their release. That was from AP. Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Democrat from Illinois, asked Secretary Mullin about this.
Now, I'd also like to address another deeply concerning matter, detainees who died while in your custody. Secretary Mullin, since Donald Trump took office, DHS's immigration detention system has been plagued by medical neglect, abuse, overcrowding, and a historically high death rate. I saw these dangerous conditions with my own eyes when I visited the Miami Correctional Facility in Bunker Hill, Indiana, where I met with individuals who told me that it takes months to receive medication refills, including for life-threatening illnesses like diabetes. Others reported being left unattended with infected boils and other serious conditions. So it's no surprise that a detainee at that facility died shortly after my visit, or that more detainees died in ICE custody in 2025 than ever before. Secretary Mullin, does DHS have any official specific internal goals or policies to reduce deaths in custody?
Ma'am, your numbers just aren't accurate. We've had 0.009%.
I didn't, Mr. Secretary.
You're asking about this. It's 0.009% of deaths. And we've had 54 total in the president's time. Those are dangerous accusations you're making.
Mr. Secretary.
Those are dangerous accusations that she's making. Because in the state of Illinois, they're twice as high to die in the state penitentiary of Illinois than they are in detention.
You are invited to this committee. This is my time.
And you need to be informed by what you're saying.
I am informed.
No, you're not, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, does DHS have any
do you realize that we have one doctor per 1,000 for detention centers for our federal detention centers in the state of Illinois? They have one per 1,800, but yet she wants to focus on our detention centers.
That. You'll get your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Democrat from Illinois, questioning Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin at today's Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. Another testy exchange was with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, the full committee ranking member, on the subject of children separated from parents. The Hill writes earlier this month, the Brookings Institution found that more than 145,000 children have had at least one parent detained because of their immigration status during President Trump's second term. More than 22,000 children have experienced the detention of both parents, per the Brookings report. Mullin and his predecessor, Kristi Noem, have repeatedly claimed that 450,000 unaccompanied minors went missing during former President Biden's tenure. Earlier this month, the department claimed it had found 146,000 of those minors. That's reporting from The Hill. Here is Congresswoman DeLauro questioning Secretary Mullin.
You know, when you take your clothes to the cleaners, they give you a tag,
and you then go back and you retrieve your clothes. When you get luggage, you go and get your luggage is returned. Well,
I wish the Biden administration would have done that.
Let me just say this to you, sir. Again, it is my time. 3,900 children were separated from their families.
450,000 kids were lost during the Biden administration. You didn't say a word about it.
Mr. Secretary, do not interrupt.
Don't you point your finger at me. Don't
I
be a
will
hypocrite.
point my finger
Don't you be
at
a hypocrite
you.
then. Then you be a threat. You should be as upset about the 450,000 kids that were lost. You didn't say a word about it. For 4 years, you never said a word.
Mr. Secretary.
Could you put him in his place for
Don't yell at me.
You should
I'm
be
the
put
good
in your
guy.
place.
Mr. Secretary, if you would like 4 minutes for a closing statement when everybody's done, I'll give you that. But while members are on their 8 minutes, I need them to have their 8 minutes.
I started my
I
comments.
appreciate that. My issue is that they say this for sound bites, and I'm not going to let them say something
What did
like
you
that
do
that's not
just
true.
recently for sound bites? I sympathize with the 400.
We are going to have something resembling order here. The time is the ranking members. If you would like to respond later on, there are methods to do that, but it's not a who can talk louder into the mic.
It's not.
So you are recognized.
Thank you very much.
I will not let her
Mr.
sit there and lie and accuse something this ridiculous.
You know-
This is the legislative branch, and it's my hearing, and so I'm going to try to some extent to control it moderately.
And do
Thank you.
not accuse me of lying. Do not.
Then don't.
I do not. I appreciate, and I said to you at the outset, there's concern for children across the board. We care deeply about what's happening to children. And I went to the border and I watched children in those fenced-in places years ago and what was happening to them. So I have a long history, Mr. Secretary, in this area. 3,900 kids were separated. Secretary Azar told me he had a way to reunite them. Many of them were not reunited till today.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, questioning Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin at an Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on DHS oversight. You also heard from Congressman Mark Amadei, Republican of Nevada, the subcommittee chair. New York Post writes that federal immigration agents have nabbed more than 10,000 migrant gangbangers since the start of President Trump's second term. The Department of Homeland Security announced Wednesday the milestone, reached just a year and a half after Trump launched his sweeping mass deportations agenda, includes arrests tied to murder, assault with a deadly weapon, drug trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, robbery, and extortion, according to DHS, reporting from the New York Post. This is Washington Today. Story from Roll Call. Emboldened by President Donald Trump, a core group of House conservatives redoubled their calls for the Senate to pass the voter ID bill known as the Save America Act this week, bringing other business to a standstill and tension between the two chambers to a boiling point. The sweeping voter ID and elections overhaul bill, which would require proof of citizenship to register to vote, photo ID at the polls, and restrictions on mail voting, among other things, has become a rallying cry for the House Freedom Caucus and others over the last several months. But they have reserved their strongest ire not for the Democrats who oppose the package, but for their Republican counterparts in the other chamber, lobbing insults and complaining that the senators are lazy. That was from Roll Call. The House did cancel debate and votes on scheduled bills today for a second day in a row, as that group of conservatives in the Freedom Caucus promised to vote no on a resolution governing the rules for debate for the bills, guaranteeing it would fail. The caucus held a news conference today. Congressman Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, wrote the Save America Act.
It's not complicated. The American people understand it, and that's why it's so important. Only American citizens should vote in American elections. Voter ID should apply in federal elections. The Constitution is clear that we have authority to address this matter, both from the standpoint of handling immigration and dealing with the rules involving our own elections. This is something that the American people want us to do. Very clearly, this is something that the President of the United States wants to see accomplished by virtue of his actions yesterday with respect to the housing bill, but also in his messaging, he's been very clear about this. The only question before us right now is whether the Senate will put America first or continue to put the Senate first. That's what the question is. We're trying to say that the Senate needs to move forward and to force this through using all of the tools at their disposal and to stop hiding behind fake thresholds that the Senate itself has put in place. There is no constitutional requirement for 60 votes.
Congressman Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, at a House Freedom Caucus news conference. Story from The Hill. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, is aiming to advance a grant program tied to the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or Save America Act, in a Republican reconciliation package, betting that the party line process could provide a pathway for one of the conservatives and President Trump's top legislative priorities. That was from The Hill. Back to today's news conference. Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican of South Carolina, the Freedom Caucus chair, and Congressman Roy were asked if that would satisfy them.
Congressman Luna brought this up a little bit, but Speaker Johnson said multiple times yesterday he thinks the path now is to include some SAVE-like elements in reconciliation involving a grant program. Is that something you guys would support in reconciliation, or think that this satisfies the need for this?
We'll let each one of them speak, but from my standpoint, I don't want to vote on anything else. Until this is passed and attached to the bills coming forward, I'm not voting for anything. And I think a lot of people are fed up. That's our way of saying, come back and do your job. Chip?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would add is we're not interested in getting a watered-down version of this. And a lot of things are thrown around about saying that the Save America Act can ride on reconciliation. And with all due respect, we've not gotten any signals from the Senate that they're inclined to, essentially overturn the parliamentarian and basically blow up the Byrd rule to say that they're going to allow this to pass alongside a reconciliation product. Step one, if you're going to have a reconciliation product, is have a reconciliation product that we can all support. We've not seen that yet. Step two is if you're going to attach the Save America Act, attach it in full, and then force the Senate to have to act on it. If the Senate chooses to water it down, then we'll have another bite at the apple when it comes back here, and we can tell them what we would do or not do. But what my message is to the Speaker and generally is, don't think we're going to just go add some token measures onto what, frankly, is not even a product yet that we should be sending over on its own merit, the reconciliation bill, and then say that we've somehow accomplished what we need to do on the Save America Act. We believe, like the president, we need the entirety of the Save America Act passed, and the Senate needs to have that now. And to my colleague's point, get back on the floor of the Senate. Why did you leave last night?
Congressman Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, and Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican of South Carolina, Freedom Caucus chair, at a Freedom Caucus news conference today. House Democrats held a hearing today looking at voting and what they call Republican threats to free and fair elections, including the Save America Act, and congressional redistricting across the country after the Supreme Court's Calais decision limiting when race can be used in drawing district lines. Congressman Joe Morelli, Democrat from New York, is the ranking member of the House Administration Committee.
The president and his allies want to take over this election. They make it clear, as I think Leader Jeffries often says, the president says the quiet part out loud. I guess we can at least give him credit for that. Whether it's the Save America Act, which would disrupt election administration, keep millions of eligible voters away from the polls, force states to hand over private personal voter data to DHS. He has issued illegal executive orders, and thank you to the courts for stepping in appropriately, but that would block access again to the ballot for millions of Americans, including an attempt to eviscerate vote by mail, as many of us know, particularly in states out west, is the primary method by which Americans in the millions cast their votes and have cast it that way for decades. Yesterday, as we all know here, impulsively canceling a signing ceremony about something that had nothing to do with elections to insert himself into and try to once again leverage the United States Senate on the blocked Save America Act. And his tantrum proves one thing. He would rather see Americans on the street than at the ballot box. It's true. He would rather see people on the streets than at the ballot box because he fears the judgment of the American people. So when you fear the answer, I guess you do everything you can to avoid the answer. And the situation and the threats grow more dire. He has, and people around him have continued to muse about deploying the military or law enforcement. He has indicated his regret for not calling out the National Guard in the advent of the 2020 election. And we find ourselves in a moment where democracy's traditional defenders are not. They are now threats. The Department of Justice is a threat. Department of Homeland Security, which has dismantled its election security apparatus, is a threat.
Congressman Joe Morelli, Democrat from New York, ranking member on the House Administration Committee at today's House Democratic hearing on voting and elections. The congressman was referring to the bipartisan housing bill that the president said he would not sign. He was originally scheduled to sign it into law yesterday, said he would not sign it until the Senate passed that Save America Act bill dealing with requiring U.S. citizenship proof to register to vote. This is Washington Today. President Trump posting on Truth Social late Wednesday night, the two major earthquakes that just hit the great people of Venezuela are both massive in scale and have left a devastating number of deaths. USA stands ready, willing, and able to help. I've instructed all agencies in our government to get ready to move quickly. We will be there for our new and great friends. Early reports are not good, signed President DJT. And Yahoo News writing at least 188 people have been killed and 1,520 injured in Venezuela after powerful back-to-back earthquakes rocked the country, according to a Thursday afternoon update provided by National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about U.S. assistance as he met with reporters during his trip to Bahrain.
Just a couple points I want to make at the outset, because I know it's been in the news this morning about this earthquake in Venezuela. I had an opportunity to talk earlier this morning with Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president. We're obviously awaiting we're already deploying search and rescue teams from Fairfax County, Virginia, and Los Angeles. There'll be some others we'll add. That's their most immediate need right now is search and rescue efforts. They have a much of collapsed buildings, and so they'll need a lot of help in terms of digging through that. The airport there is badly damaged, so we'll have to rely on the Department of War to deploy assets there. And then we're also helping them with some overhead imagery, especially in coastal areas where they don't have full visibility over what the damage has been and what the impact has been. Those are the acute, like short-term needs over the next 48 to 72 hours, because in search and rescue, you're trying to get to people while you can still save their lives. They're buried under rubble. And other countries are responding as well. The Qataris have already offered assistance, as we spoke to them earlier today as well. El Salvador has stepped up, and multiple countries around the region, including Chile and others, have reached out to us to communicate and get that happening. As we move forward with that response, with the sort of the short-term phase of response recovery, the second phase, of course, will be identifying their more longer-term and acute needs. What are the things over the long term they're going to need help with? We'll have a better assessment of that after the next 48 hours when we're on the ground and as the Venezuelan authorities get more visibility as to the level of damage in terms of housing. Where do you put all these people that don't have anywhere to go live? What we can do to help restore or help them restore their communications, their internet, their telecom, and so forth. We'll also have to manage what we expect is going to be a surge of private donation. I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of people from the United States and entities in the United States. We've already been in touch with some of the leading charities, but I know at the local level, particularly in places like where I call home in South Florida, there'll be a lot of people that are going to want to step forward and help and provide assistance. And we just need to find the way that we can step in and provide logistical support from that. In addition, of course, we've already stood up our disaster response teams at the Department of State and our humanitarian efforts. It's something we did very well in Jamaica after that storm, and it's something we're really prepared to do now. So I've already spoken to Secretary Hegseth. The Department of War is going to have to play a big logistical role here, because they have the ability to land in challenging places. Right now, the airport in Caracas is damaged. One of the runways is cracked. And so, but the Department of War has the capability to land in situations like that. So we'll need that. So we have an awful whole of government response. It'll be big, it'll be fast, and it'll be effective. And of course, obviously, we're in touch through our embassy on the ground, where I believe we have almost full accountability of all of our personnel there. And of course, Americans are safe. The last point is we've also, we know there are American citizens that are inside of Venezuela now, so we've also gone through the normal processes that we set up for them to be able to communicate with us in case they need assistance or help.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking to reporters in Bahrain, where he's meeting with U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf. U.S. Southern Command says it's working with the State Department to support the relief operations in Venezuela, writing, "Our joint forces are moving quickly to bring the unmatched airlift, logistics, and life-saving capabilities of the U.S. military to help save lives and support the government of Venezuela during this crisis." And Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, Democrat from Texas, writing on X, "My heart is with every Venezuelan family, including those here at home waiting for news of loved ones after the devastating earthquakes. Venezuelans need more than words. They need help now. The U.S. must deliver a full-scale, immediate, and sustained response with search and rescue teams, medical supplies, and humanitarian aid. In a disaster this catastrophic, every minute matters." Washington Today continues in a moment.
In a divided media world, One place brings Americans together. According to a new Magid research report, nearly 90 million Americans turn to C-SPAN, and they're almost perfectly balanced. 28% conservative, 27% liberal or progressive, 41% moderate. Republicans watching Democrats, Democrats watching Republicans, moderates watching all sides. Because C-SPAN viewers want the facts, straight from the source. No commentary, no agenda, just democracy, unfiltered, every day on the C-SPAN networks.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more Supreme Court decisions released today. NBC News writes the court on Thursday struck down a Hawaii gun restriction that limits when people can carry firearms on certain private properties open to the public, saying it infringes on the right to bear arms. That was a 6-3 ruling. And the Supreme Court sided with the maker of the Roundup weed killer Thursday in a ruling expected to block thousands of lawsuits alleging it failed to warn people the product could cause cancer. That was a 7-2 ruling. NBC News writes the decision is a victory for the Trump administration, but one that could be tricky politically since allies in the Make America Healthy Again movement want to rein in pesticide use. Washington Post writing the Senate rejected a resolution Wednesday to block President Donald Trump from resuming the war with Iran after he complained that the passage of a similar resolution Tuesday undermined ongoing negotiations with Tehran over its nuclear program. The resolution failed 50-47 in a late-night procedural vote. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, who voted with Democrats for Tuesday's resolution, flipped and voted against advancing this one. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, who has voted for every previous resolution since the war started, voted present rather than directly opposing Trump. The vote is a defeat for Democrats who celebrated the passage of a similar war powers resolution Tuesday as a symbolic rebuke of the unpopular war. That was from the Washington Post. Senator Paul, writing on X Wednesday night, "Tonight I will vote present on the war powers resolution. My opinion on the debate over war and executive power has not changed, and I have voted that way several times. But since hostilities seem to be over and the president asked me to give consideration to his negotiating position, I will do so. My vote of present is a way to give the president more space and leverage to negotiate a lasting peace." That was the post from Senator Rand Paul. And Senator Cassidy explained in an interview with Margaret Brennan, moderator of CBS News' Face the Nation, why he changed his vote.
Senator, as I understand it, the Vice President and Special Envoy Witkoff gave you a special briefing in the Situation Room late Wednesday on Iran. What you heard made you change your vote. Why are you no longer trying to stop the president from resuming strikes in Iran?
That actually was not my original rationale for voting for the War Powers Act. My original rationale was because we were not being briefed. We could be the Senate, the Congress, or the United States. And I felt it important that we be briefed. I agreed with the president's original goals. Those were not being achieved by my perception. Mm-hmm. And so before I could say, okay, everything's hunky-dory, I said, I need to be briefed. After the exchange I had with the president yesterday, I passed a note to Steve Witkoff. Steve, I would consider changing my vote, but I've been voting yes because I've not been briefed. He said, called me back in the hour, and let's have a briefing. We had it last night.
What did you hear that changed your mind?
So if the original objections were to destroy, degrade, if you will, Iran's nuclear capability, their ability to do a ballistic missile, and their conventional warfare capability, and we were supposed to be out of there in 4 to 5 weeks, with maybe a little bit of a sprinkling of regime change. That's how it came across. Mm-hmm. The regime change is off the table. That doesn't seem as if that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it does seem as if the way they laid it out, the other 3 objectives can be reached. And with those other 3 objectives, now we have to trust but verify, but as they laid it out, they have a plausible plan by which to achieve those, and that's what I was interested in.
You wanted to get the details on the diplomacy.
Correct.
Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, interviewed by Margaret Brennan, moderator of Face the Nation on CBS. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, with a statement Wednesday night after the Senate voted 50-47 against the Iran War Powers Act resolution, the day after supporting it. After both Republican majority houses took the historic step of voting that additional war against Iran is illegal without congressional authorization, President Trump came to the Capitol and tried to browbeat Republican senators for upholding their oaths of office. To appease his temper tantrum, Republicans agreed to defeat a superfluous motion to proceed to a separate war powers resolution currently pending before the Senate. The vote is of no consequence and does not undo the expressed position of Congress that further war against Iran is illegal unless Congress votes for it. That statement from Democratic Senator Tim Kaine. Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, was on Fox News Channel today with his take on why the Senate voted the way it did.
Senator, the Senate rejected that measure to restrict the president's war powers regarding Iran. That gives, obviously, President Trump a victory. Why the reversal?
Because the president came to lunch. I invited him on Friday. He came to lunch. I run the Wednesday lunch, which is a policy lunch. He came and said, "What the hell are you guys doing? I'm in the middle of a negotiation trying to bring Iran to the table, and you guys say I have to withdraw troops? It's the craziest thing in the world. Why would you ever give the Iranians any idea that we're not united?" He was furious with the people that voted to say he had to withdraw troops when he's trying to get a deal. It was a foolish vote for the people that said, oh, no, we have to withdraw troops when we watch what President Trump's trying to do to preserve American lives and bring peace around the world.
Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, on Fox News today. President Trump writing on Truth Social late Wednesday night. Wow, the Senate just changed its vote on Iran from 50 to 48 against to 50 to 47 for. Rand Paul and Bill Cassidy changed. Thank you to Leader John Thune, Lindsey Graham, Bernie Moreno, and all. This puts Iran on notice. Signed, President DJT. Story from the New York Times. Iran's Revolutionary Guards issued a new threat on Thursday to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz as Secretary of State Marco Rubio met Gulf Arab leaders in Bahrain to try to allay their security concerns. Iran warned ships that the only route through the strait, which is usually a vital pathway for oil and natural gas, was through its waters in coordination with its Navy, and said they should not take an alternative route, in apparent reference to Omani territorial waters. The threat came just as shipping in the strategic waterway was surging this week after months of paralysis. That was from the New York Times. Secretary Rubio spoke to reporters in Bahrain.
What is your comment on the Iranian-Omani dispute regarding the safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, so we've reached a point now in this where you're hearing, for example, the Iranians will say one thing, but then something else is actually happening. So here's what I would tell everybody. It's now obvious to us, and I think should be obvious to all of you, that the Iranian system is going to continue to produce all sorts of maximalist rhetoric. They're going to have people going on their TV, on their official media, and making all kinds of pronouncements. But what we're interested in is not their press conferences. What we're interested in is whether or not ships are moving. If ships are moving as they should be moving, then that's what we're going to judge and that's what we're going to react to. If, on the other hand, this rhetoric is backed up by actual ships being threatened and ships are not moving, that's a violation of the agreement and we're going to have a problem with it. So what we are watching is we see the continued flow of ships. In this particular case, that lane is the one that's being used for this evacuation effort that's being led by the International Maritime Organization, and that must continue. And as long as it continues, they can have all the press conferences they want. If that stops, then we're going to have a problem.
Mr. Secretary, from Oman that there would be no fee or tolling system imposed, including after a specific commitment from Oman that there was zero interest in a tolling or fee system, including after the 60-day negotiation.
I don't know if it's been issued yet, but we have a joint statement that's coming from our meeting, and it makes it abundantly clear. And so I would just reiterate the point that I made earlier. And I said this, I don't know if you guys were there in the open portion of it. I said fees and tolls are the same thing to me. Okay? If you're paying someone to go there, I don't care if you call it a fee or a toll or a donation. It's a toll. That's how we're going to define it. That's international waterway. There isn't a nation on earth that supports having to pay money to go through the straits. And think about it this way. If you have, first, it's not even workable. Let's suppose that we went crazy and lost our minds completely and decided to agree to have a tolling or a fee mechanism. How would that work? It's not doable, because what's the consequence for not paying? Let's say a ship says, well, I'm not going to pay the fee. It's not like a toll on a road. You don't get a ticket in the mail. They get shot at. You shoot at one ship, you sink one ship, no other ship is going to move. So that sort of system is not only unwise, it can't happen, it's not even workable. So you might as well abandon the fantasy now. So I think we've been clear. You can call it a fee, you can call it a toll, call it whatever you want. If you are charging money to use the straits, we won't support it, we won't tolerate it, we won't allow it. And I think there was unanimity in that room on that point.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking to reporters in Bahrain. This is C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today. From CBS News, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure, rose at a 4.1% annual rate in May, highlighting the central bank's challenge in reining in prices. The reading matched economists' forecast for the PCE report to come in at 4.1% annually, according to financial data service FactSet. That compares with an annual increase of 3.8% in April and represents the highest level since April 2023. Core PCE, which strips out volatile energy and food prices, rose 3.4%, slightly higher than the 3.3% forecast by economists. The Iran war reignited inflation by driving up oil and gasoline prices, leaving American drivers paying the highest fuel costs in 3 years. Reporting from CBS News. Inflation was a topic today at a Senate Banking Committee hearing with witness Christopher Phelan, nominated to be chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, an agency within the Executive Office of the President. Here are questions from Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, the committee's ranking member.
You have a PhD in economics from a very prestigious university. You've been a professor for nearly 30 years. You've taught thousands of students by this point. On paper, you look like someone who should be able to provide objective advice. So I have some questions, and quite frankly, I hope they are really easy questions for you. President Trump promised to bring prices down on, quote, day one. Is headline inflation higher today than it was in February 2025?
Thank you, Senator. Headline inflation now is certainly lower than it was during the Biden administration.
I'm sorry. Come on, let's not play this game. You heard my question. President Trump was sworn in January 2025 under the promise he would lower costs on day one. The question I'm asking is inflation, headline inflation, today higher than it was in February 2025? It's a fact question.
Thank you, Senator. There's a reason economists tend to focus on core inflation, and that is because food and energy is quite volatile.
Okay, can you
core
give me
inflation is lower than when President Trump took office.
We'll do core. Can you give me the answer on headline inflation? I don't want to know how fast you can dance. I want to know if you can answer simple, factual questions. That's all I'm looking for here.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I do not know exactly what the headline inflation was on January 20th, 2025.
2.8%. So answer the question. Is headline inflation higher today than it was in February 2025?
Headline inflation now, the last one was year over year, 4.2%.
Okay, so is 4.2% higher than 2.8%?
Ranking Member, yes, it is.
Oh, wow. Was that so hard? You know, you're going to be the guy called on to give real facts. So let me try another one. Dr. Phelan, is annual inflation higher than wage growth today?
Thank you, Ranking Member. There has been, since President Trump took office, weekly inflation-adjusted earnings are higher now than they were the day President Trump took office.
The question I asked you is inflation higher than wage growth right now? In other words, even if families are getting raises, on average, are they falling behind because of inflation?
Thank you, Ranking Member. I do think it's important to have an appropriate time frame when considering anything like this.
That's your time frame.
An appropriate time frame is when President Trump took office.
The question is, I just want a fact.
Inflation-adjusted wages are lower than they are now.
Today, are families getting ahead or falling behind? You got one word to answer that. What's your word?
My word is at. Real wages are higher now. Real wages are higher now than they were at the beginning of Trump's administration.
You've already told me inflation is 4.2%, right? What's the annual wage growth right now? It's just a fact question.
Thank you, Senator. I do not have that in front of me right now.
It's 3.4%. So let's put this one together. is 4.2, higher than 3.4.
I will repeat what I said, which is real wage growth in this administration is positive.
Testimony from Christopher Phelan, nominated for chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. He is a University of Minnesota economics professor, and he previously worked as an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minnesota. Questioned by Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, ranking member on the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. The previous chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Christopher Myron, resigned in February. Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican from Ohio, also asked the nominee today about inflation.
It's fair to say that it was pretty obvious that if the president took action against Iran to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon they would actually use, that you were going to see a spike in gas prices. But now that we've gotten a path to peace, that those gas prices have come down very, very quickly, that we're going to go back to where we were last year, which is dramatically lower inflation than we had under Biden. Is that accurate?
The price level at the end of the Biden administration was approximately 21% higher than the price level at the beginning of the Biden administration.
Where are we now?
We are inflation now on an annualized basis is significantly lower than that pace.
So about 5%, does that sound about right?
5% more or less during the Biden administration.
No, during the Trump administration.
During the Trump administration, no, it's lower than that.
Lower than that. But so we have brought down the price. We had a big egg conversation the other day. Evidently, some people buy $9 eggs. But the good news is they were on sale at Wegmans for $1.49. Now, we're not allowed to promote businesses, so that is not a commercial for Wegmans, but $1.49 for a dozen eggs, pretty good deal. The massive stimulus that led to historical levels of fraud under the Biden administration, did that help lower inflation or raise inflation? Again, I'm asking you for specific numbers, not a quiz, just generally speaking as an economist.
Generally, the rule for economics is that, and this is an oversimplification, is that inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods.
So point there for a second. So in a time during COVID where there was a supply shock also, where supply was way down because of these ridiculous rules about social distancing and everything else that was a total disaster. You had the supply shock and then stimulus. Would it have surprised you that we saw up to 9% inflation that destroyed working Americans? So flat wage growth and a 9% inflation. What does that do to a working family?
Thank you, Senator. No, I was not surprised. At the time...
You didn't have to get a PhD to figure that out, did you?
I did.
Could have been so much easier. There's great community colleges in Ohio. Or I went to the library. They have this great book. It's called Supply and Demand for Dummies. It's fantastic.
Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican from Ohio, questioning the witness Christopher Phelan, nominated for chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors at today's Banking Committee confirmation hearing. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 71, NASDAQ down 118, S&P losing a fraction. Senate Republicans, writes USA Today, batted down a last-ditch measure on Wednesday that would have repealed Trump administration regulations implementing new federal student loan caps for graduate school. Democrats offered the legislation, which failed on a party line vote, ahead of a fast-approaching July 1st deadline when the borrowing limits will take effect for Americans nationwide. The changes were passed last year as part of the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act and were later finalized by the Department of Education regulations. That was from USA Today. The Senate debate and the vote was late Wednesday night. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, spoke in favor of the resolution to disapprove the Education Department regulations.
Let's reject this rule that puts up a huge barrier for the children of families of modest means and medium income or low incomes. Let's knock down that barrier. Let's not force them into predatory lending. Now, there are some who say, but wait. We think that the schools will lower their tuition as a result of us making loans unavailable. That's a false premise. Never worked anywhere because the schools have to pay the professors. They have to pay for the infrastructure. They have to pay interest on the buildings they've already built. And so they have to charge accordingly. When we saw before, and we've been down this road, when there was the limit on public loans and people had to go to private loans, like the friend of my son, you end up with those 10, 11, 12% interest loans. They're predatory against our children of the next generation. So who here wants to speak up for the rich to be the only ones with opportunity in this country? Let's strike down this rule and say to the president's team, when this bill was passed, no one in this chamber meant to say that opportunity is only for the wealthy kids.
Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, on the Senate floor Wednesday night. The graduate student government loan limits that will take effect July 1st are $20,500 per year for master's degrees, with a $100,000 lifetime limit, and $50,000 per year for professional degrees with a $200,000 lifetime aggregate limit. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, spoke against the resolution of disapproval.
It is a false compassion to say that every person should be able to borrow as much as they want from the federal government to go to the school, whatever the school charges. That is a false compassion. Republicans are not about false compassion. We're about allowing Americans to live the American dream. But that is not by saddling them with debt like a weight around their neck, pulling them into a pool of debt from which their whole life is affected. Mr. President, it's pretty clear. The cost of higher education is out of control. And that is in part because of federal lending programs that would allow students to borrow whatever they wanted to almost. And so universities raise their tuition to maximize income, not to maximize value, but to maximize income. By the way, a 2023 National Bureau of Economic Research study found that uncapped federal borrowing for graduate programs did not increase access or degree attainment. Think about this. Oh, we can get much, much, much more money, but the NBER found that giving as much money as they wanted did not increase access and did not increase degree attainment. You know what it did increase? Student loan debt. That's what it increased, because the universities making profit off of that really ultimately were not left holding the bag. It was the student and the U.S. taxpayer who were left holding the bag.
Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, on the Senate floor Wednesday night. This resolution of disapproval of the new Education Department graduate student loan limits, scheduled to take effect July 1st, failed in a party line vote, 45-52. NBC4 in Washington, writing the Great American State Fair celebrating the United States' 250th birthday, opened Thursday, bringing a Ferris wheel, special exhibits, and road closures to the National Mall. A long line of fairgoers, some in patriotic garb, started flowing in at 10:45 a.m., greeted by a replica of the controversial arch that President Donald Trump wants to build near Arlington National Cemetery. Reporting from NBC4, the Great American State Fair kickoff was Wednesday night, and one of the speakers, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins.
Over the next 16 days, right here on the National Mall, Americans will experience something unlike any other country has seen in generations. That is a modern-day World's Fair. A celebration of the people, the traditions, the innovations, and the spirit that have made America the greatest nation on earth. More than 150 exhibits from the nation's states and territories will be on display. You'll enjoy music and movies and cultural performances and agricultural exhibits, family attractions, spectacular flyovers, and one of the most iconic sights in Washington this summer, a giant Ferris wheel rising above the National Mall. Over 2 centuries ago, state fairs began as harvest time agricultural showcases that helped promote American-made products as the nation grew more economically independent from Great Britain. Restricted trade surrounding the War of 1812 inspired rural New Englanders to exhibit their livestock, to exhibit their produce and handicrafts in lively competitions, spotlighting the best of Republican localism and agrarian self-governance, the very best of America. And for the next 2 weeks, the very best of America is gathered right here in Washington, D.C.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins at the Great American State Fair kickoff Wednesday night on the National Mall. Today was the first day open to the public. Runs 16 days. It's organized by Freedom 250, a nonprofit aligned with President Donald Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance was at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California today, talking about his new memoir titled Communion, Finding My Way Back to Faith. Focuses on his conversion to Catholicism in 2019. At one point, he talked about a well-known author.
And what C.S. Lewis did for me, and what, I talk about in the book about being, really, really attracted to this Aslan figure in a child's book and encountering God in a children's book in a way that I had never encountered God when I was being raised by my grandmother in southwestern Ohio. And what I meant by that is that there were all of these things, that Aslan would say that I later found out were basically just C.S. Lewis copying from the Bible and putting them in his books. I mean, it was fundamentally, if you don't know the backstory of the C.S. Lewis's novels, what he was trying to do was imagine what would Jesus Christ look like in the context of a children's novel. I mean, that's who Aslan is. It's not a metaphor or an allegory of Christ. He's actually trying to say this is what Christ would look like, would sound like, were he in this, very rich children's novel that he wrote. And what I found so compelling about it is that, there was something deeply smart about C.S. Lewis's Christianity. And I think, by the way, that led me astray in some ways. And what I mean is there was a point in my life where my faith was very much of the head, but not of the heart. And so I think you can overthink these things. You can over-intellectualize these things. But the way that God sort of started to pull me back in is I realized that there were a lot of really interesting ideas at the core of Christian philosophy and at the core of Christian theology that I had cast aside, but were far richer than what I'd realized. And that kind of, again, that was the hook. That started to draw me back in. And there were other hooks, of course, but that was a very, very important hook for me, realizing as a kid who thought of himself as very smart and very rational, realizing that there was a brilliance to the Christian faith. There was an insight into the Christian faith that I had never really taken seriously, but was very much there.
Vice President J.D. Vance today at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California, talking about his new book, Communion, Finding My Way Back to Faith. That book is currently #1 on Amazon's bestsellers and political leader biographies and number 26 on the Amazon overall bestsellers list. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember, for more news, tune in at the top of each hour during the day as C-SPAN Radio plays Associated Press news updates. Have a good night.